Hi, I'm Dr. Gwyn Erwin, and welcome back to my channel, Healing for Your Life. In a previous video, we talked about my model of healthy development and the 7 keystones of that development. Today, we're going to take each of those developments in order, one video per element, and really explore what it means so that you get the idea of the profound nature of what we need in order to develop healthfully. The first, then, is states, or we also call them states of being. Now, a state is, you'll understand in just a minute because you'll recognize them in yourself. But a state is not just a mood. It isn't having the blues, or it isn't just being excited or enthusiastic. A state is a state of being that is made up of 8 distinct experiences. And in order to have a state, you have to have that state's variety of each of those elements. So, for instance, a state is made up of emotion or emotions, certain ones. A state is made up of belief systems. A state is made up of our attachment systems. A state is made up of certain memories. A state is made up of our perceptual bias. A state is made up of physiological sensations, and a state is made up of our voice and language as well as our behavior. So these are the 8 elements that make up a single state. So for instance, if you're doing the laundry and you've had a hard day at work and you're tired and you're trying to get the kids to bed, you're going to be in a particular state. And each one of those elements is going to play a specific factor. If you are waking up on a Saturday morning and you have lots of energy and you're looking forward to the day and you think about putting in a load of laundry before you go off to the park or the beach, you're in a very different state. And each of those elements will be different elements with a different emphasis. If you're at work and concentrating hard on a project or trying to solve a problem or celebrating an achievement, each of those are different states. If you're lovemaking with your partner, you are in a very particular state, and each one of those elements is going to have its own flavor according to the state that you're in. So, for instance, let's take an example. Let's say that somebody has to give a speech. And based on previous experience, they don't feel very good at that. And so as they're getting ready to go out to the podium and the microphone, they enter a certain state of high stress for them. So in that state, their emotion may be a lot of fear, even panic. Their perceptual bias may be, I have failed at this before, I'm not going to do very well today. So the new experience comes front-loaded with their past experience. That perceptual bias then is made up of their belief systems. I suck at giving speeches. I'm terrible at it. I really shouldn't be doing it. They're going to also have their attachment patterns. Nobody's really going to like me. They're going to want to get up and leave. They're going to have memories of past failures. They're going to be affected in their voice and the way they use language. And then their behavior may be very awkward and very faulting. So you can see how all of those elements weave together to give somebody a state experience. Now let's take another experience. I was a shy little girl. But I had a father, particularly, my mother too, but my father was a tremendous influence on me in that he was a very prominent person in his field. And as such, he expected me to know how to behave in almost any circumstance. And so, even though I was shy, I learned all sorts of skills along the way of how to meet people from every walk of life, how to interact with them, how to speak well. So I enjoy speaking. Well, I guess you can tell that, right? That's why I'm doing this, one of the reasons. But I really enjoy it. I enjoy communicating. I enjoy connecting. I enjoy putting out there the things that I've learned that I think and hope will be helpful to other people. So then in this state, my emotion is one of kind of happy anticipation and pretty relaxed. My physiological sensation is high energy, but again, pretty comfortable. My belief system is I'm good enough for this. And I have good experience behind me where I've done it well through years of teaching and public speaking and presenting at conferences. And so my perceptual bias is it's going to go well today. And if it doesn't, I can redo it. My attachment pattern is I look forward to connecting to you. And I think if you're watching this, you want to connect with me. My voice and language, I feel my personal voice is very much available to me with my kind of heartfelt responses and emotion. And my language is articulate and easily accessible, I hope. And my behavior is to be a pleasure to you and somebody you look forward to being with. So that's the state I'm in right now. Very different from somebody who has stage fright or has all of those other belief systems and emotions and sensations kind of dogging them as they face something that's very difficult for them. So that's an example of state systems. Now, states are very interesting because they form into clusters. And they form into clusters according to their duration, their intensity, and their frequency. Those three things determine the neuronal pathways that our brain wires, soft wires. So if an experience, positive or negative, lasts, if it is intense, and if it repeats, then that state is going to become more durable, more lasting, and intense, positively or negatively, and likely repeat. Now, when we're born, Frank Putnam, who is a kind of an expert on states, tells us that we're born with 5 states: pre-crying, crying, light sleep, deep sleep, and being awake. That's at birth. By 18 months, we have thousands of states in what's called state architecture. It looks sort of like a 3-dimensional grid. And you might have a single state over here, and 2 states here, and 5 states here, in different clusters. Some are off by themselves, which happens especially with trauma, because those states get dissociated or split off. We're going to have a whole video on that separately. But for now, those states that cluster because there's a link or a bridge between them. So for instance, a newborn baby is crying. Or let's say just fussing. And it's uncomfortable. It wants to be fed or held or changed diapers or warmed up or cooled off, but it wants something and it's fussing to get it. And mommy and daddy attend to that fussing and figure out what the baby needs and provide that. And so the baby goes from fussiness to being awake and calm. If that happens repeatedly, fussiness and calmness are going to become bridged. That forms a little two-state cluster. If, for instance, a baby is crying, it's the middle of the night, and the parents are exhausted, or, unfortunately, if they're somewhat abusive, they may not come right away, or they may believe that the baby needs to cry it out and will just go back to sleep on its own, which, by the way, is not really the case. Babies do that, but the reason they do that is that they secrete a hormone in their brains that anesthetizes them. So it isn't really learning how to self-soothe and go back to sleep. It's learning how to shut down. So here we have a baby who is fussing. Nobody comes. The fussing now escalates into full-fledged crying. And if the baby is not attended to, at some point, exhausted, and with this brain hormone release that is anesthetizing them, they will fall into a deep sleep. Well, that's going to form a cluster as well between fussiness, full-fledged crying, and deep unconscious sleep. But that cluster is trauma-based. And again, if there is duration, if there is intensity, and it repeats, that neuronal pathway is getting formed in the brain so that it is more and more likely for that cluster and that state system to repeat. So as the child gets older in either one of these states, a positive one or a negative one, let's look at what happens with these 8 different areas. So for the baby who feels met and understood and cared for, their emotion is going to be pleasurable. They're going to feel of value. They're going to feel delighted in. They're going to feel cared for. Their physiological sensations will be that of comfort and ease and kind of sweet recovery. Their belief system will be, these people love me, they care about me, I'm important to them, I matter. So their perceptual bias over time is going to be one of trust. When I'm in distress or I need something, those that I love and that I need are going to respond. Their attachment patterns are going to become secure. Their memories are going to be based on good memories of having been cared for and met in very reliable ways. Their voice is going to develop better because they will go from coos and little cries into eventually words, Mommy, Daddy. And then their language will become more articulate as well because it's received. And their behavior will be joyfully receptive, that they respond to being cared for, and then develop empathy and care for others. Now let's look at those same 8 elements when there is deprivation, neglect, or abuse, any form of trauma that has duration and intensity and repeats. The emotion is going to be fear, dread, despair. The physiological sensation might be a shrinking away or immobilization. The belief system is, I'm not wanted, I'm no good, nobody loves me, I'm not lovable. The perceptual bias, nobody's going to come, nobody's going to help me, I can't count on people. The attachment pattern will be insecure and either ambivalent or avoidant or disorganized. The voice and language will be, it doesn't do any good if I speak. It doesn't do any good if I communicate. In fact, I may get punished for it. And I don't know the right things to say and the right time to say them. And my memories about this make me shiver and shake, and I don't like them, and I want them to go away. And the behavior in young years will either be immobilization or by the age of 2.5 or 3, fleeing. So you can see this is kind of a stark contrast between two very different kinds of state systems. We have thousands of them. Our experience, no matter what it is, our learning, our creativity, our relationships, the way we work, the way we conduct ourselves, everything in our lives is state dependent, meaning that whatever state we're in, when critical experiences are formed, shape future experience. The last thing I want to talk about before we end today are state transitions, or what Putnam calls switching. And this is being able to go from state to state or cluster to cluster. Now, where trauma is involved, there aren't bridges necessarily between states that are readily accessible, or there may not be bridges between clusters of states. So when somebody gets triggered by trauma in current time, previous states that are already wired in the brain come up, and suddenly, metaphorically, they feel like they're in Albany, New York, and they don't know how to get back to LA. It may be a whiff, it may be a casual comment or a look on somebody's face, because in later years it takes very little to provoke the same intensity as the originating experience. So without a bridge, it's very difficult for somebody in a trauma state to move into a non-trauma state. When somebody is upset, the first task is to get out of the trauma state. That will be another video as well. Therapeutically, we work with states all the time. And again, in later videos, we'll go into more of this in terms of therapeutic uses of states and how we work with them to build bridges, to make links. But let me end with this note today. Mental health, actually, is the ability to maintain your sense of being as you flow through a series of states during your day, and that if you are thrown into or experience a state that is uncomfortable or that you don't like, that you know how to switch or transition into another state that is much more productive and much more helpful and much more creative. I look forward to seeing you in our next video. Thank you so much. Bye.